Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. It was actually back in 1997, can you believe it, over 20 years ago, that Woodlands Church in Alistry started meeting in the local school. And because we didn't have enough space in the building we had at that time, and so we decided at that point to commission a group of people to go off and think about church planting. And they took a few months over it, and in October 1998, exactly 20 years ago, the church plant report was produced. And here it is. Can you believe it? I still got it. 20 years later, I found it in my files. The Woodlands Church Plant Report of October 1998. 20 years later, here we are. If you look back over those 20 years, there's been lots of ups and downs, lots of steps forward and steps backward, lots of successes, lots of failures. But today is really a new beginning. A new beginning. And as I think about this book of Deuteronomy, as I have done quite a bit over the last few months, Moses is about to die. That's not anything prophetic about me. I'm not putting myself in Moses' shoes at that point. But Moses is about to die. The people have actually wandered for 40 years in the wilderness, and that's not suggesting that Springwood has wandered in the wilderness for 20 years. But interestingly, the whole generation that started out from Egypt has now gone. And it's a brand new generation that's about to start as they go into the promised land. And it did strike me just to ask, how many people are here who were here when the church plant started in 2004? Just a few, just a handful. Most of the previous generation have actually gone. It's a brand new generation today. And so it was a new start for them as Moses was about to go and Joshua was about to lead the people into the promised land. And I wonder how Joshua was feeling as he stood on the threshold of this new start. And I wonder how the people of Springwood are feeling today. And this is the word of encouragement that Moses, or the Lord, gives to Joshua through Moses. Verse 8, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. The Lord himself goes before you. Joshua was probably thinking, Moses, I wish you were still here. I don't want to do this on my own. I'd certainly prefer to do it with you. And Moses says to Joshua at that point, well, look, it's not about a human being going ahead of you. It's not even an angel going ahead of you, but the Lord himself, Yahweh, the living God, is going to go ahead of you. Himself is going to go ahead of you. Yahweh, the living God, the covenant, the great promise-keeping God who destroyed the Egyptians and all those plagues, who led them out of captivity, who parted the Red Sea, who appeared on Mount Sinai. This living God is going to go ahead of you. He's going to go before you. And so the word, I think, to us today is follow him closely. Follow him closely. He is going to go ahead of you into the next stage. I was researching just today, just thinking about those, I don't know if you were interested in the Olympics, I'm not that interested in the Winter Olympics, but the blind skiers who go down the mountain at a fantastic pace. And they have somebody, one set of skiers, of these blind skiers, they have somebody in front of them who they keep right behind, and they can't see where they're going, but they follow as closely as they possibly could the person in front, who's shouting at them instructions, and they get the wind of their body and so on, and so they keep as close as they can, and they go down these mountains at a tremendous pace. Follow him closely. It's the Lord himself who's going to go before you. But he will be with you, not just ahead of you, but he will be with you, right by your side. Jesus said, I am with you always. As you set out on this new stage of your life as a church, Springwood Church. You've got the living God going ahead of you, but he's also right there beside you. So follow him closely, but will you lean heavily on him as well as he's with you? I'm seeing my mum tomorrow. Mum is now 90, and she's very, very unsteady on her pegs these days. And so whenever she gets out of the car, I have to be with her. And as long as she's got my arm and she's leaning heavily on me, she's okay. But as soon as she lets go, she wobbles. Are you going to be that dependent on this living God? He goes ahead of you. The Lord himself goes ahead of you, but he will be with you. And then he says he'll never leave you nor forsake you. In the good times that will come and the bad times and the successes and the failure and the ups and the downs, he still won't leave you. Permanently, he'll be there. So follow him closely, lean on him heavily all the time. Jesus said, I won't leave you as orphans. Some of you from Alistair may have heard this illustration before, but many, many years ago, my little boy, I think he was about 4, he had to have a minor operation. And he was really nervous about having this little operation. And I talked to the surgeon as he came in to just have a quick chat with me and chat with him before the day started. He said, well, when it's time for him to go down, you'll be with him all the way until we actually put him under, so he won't be left on his own. So that was great. I sat in his room, we played with each other, we played with his little owl, Aussie owl, and so on. And then the guys came in their school scrubbed up with their hats and their funny boots and so on, and he began to clutch Aussie a bit tighter, and his bottom lip started to go. I said, it's all right, Dad's with you. And we got to the lift that went down to the operating theatre, and all these guys in their scrubbed up uniforms said, that's it, Mr. Gunn, you've got to stay now. I said, no, I was told I could go all the way down with him and be in the room until he was fast. Oh, no, you're not allowed in the actual room where we put him to sleep. You've got to say goodbye now. At which point, floodgates opened, And I stood by these lift doors and watched my little boy, 4 years old, go away on a trolley and the doors just closed. I will never leave you or forsake you. Follow him closely, lean on him heavily all the time. And don't be afraid and don't be discouraged. Fear produced by things that are going on outside, discouragement as we look inside and think we can't cope. Don't as a church. Don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. Whatever's going to come ahead, the Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid or be discouraged. And the leaders of Alistair have kindly just thought they'd like to give you a present as a church, Springwood today. I don't know where you can hang it because you're in a school building. But there is that verse for you. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He'll never leave you or forsake you. Do not be afraid or discouraged. You can put it up somewhere. That's another thing to bring to school on a Sunday morning, isn't it? And hang up somewhere and oh dear. But there's the word of encouragement. But now a word of challenge just to finish. If you turn over to Acts chapter 18. The story of the early church, Acts chapter 18. Somebody else will shout out the page number, I guess, when they get there before me. 1114. Verses 9 and 10. Acts chapter 18, verses 9 and 10. One night the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent. For I am with you. And no one is going to attack and harm you because I have many people in this city. And this city is Corinth. And it was known to be a really, really hard place. Which is why in verse 1 we read that Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. And then in verse 8, many of the Corinthians who heard Paul believed and were baptized. And in verse 11, so Paul stayed in Corinth. It doesn't say he just stayed there for a year, but he stayed in Corinth. This was the amazing thing, that this work was going on in Corinth, of all places. There was fierce opposition. And here we are on Oakwood with little or no opposition at all. And so the Lord comes to Paul in night and says, don't be afraid. There it is again, don't be afraid. Jesus said the same thing, you know. It's quite interesting, isn't it? The worst they can do to you here on Oakwood is kill you. That's what Jesus said. They can't take the most precious thing from you. The worst anybody could do for speaking about Jesus at the end of the day is kill you. And they're not going to do that on Oakwood because it's illegal. So keep on speaking. And this is the challenge for me. Keep on speaking. Speaking what? The good news. Faith comes by, and hearing comes by the word of God. We've got to sow the seed. This church will not grow unless we're speaking about Jesus all the time. There's a book that's just been written. I read a review of it. It's not a Christian book. It's a secular book looking at religious Britain today. And in this book, it criticised these wretched evangelicals for always banging on about Jesus. Keep banging on about Jesus. That's what I'd say, because that's what Jesus wants us to do. Here's the challenge. When was the last time, if we've got good news, when was the last time that you personally said something about Jesus to somebody who didn't know anything about Jesus? It's a huge challenge, isn't it? Matthew came to my house this week to look at the flat roofs. I lent him a ladder. He went up on the flat roofs. He didn't fall off. He came down safely, I'm glad to say. But his bigger risk is that he never hears about Jesus and ends up in hell. So what am I going to do? Well, the least I can do, even if I can't even get to the gospel with him, just because he's visited my house, is give him a copy of the good news, isn't it? We've got the good news. It's no good trying to grow a church if we're not banging on about Jesus.